I just think there's so many things about the country, and if we personally, like, we have to stop listening to a lot of the white noise coming out of Washington and what someone calls them the Mango Mussolini. And that's a term I've heard. And start ignoring that and focusing on our own, focusing on what we can do.
This has nothing to do with the States, though. Our Canadian heritage has nothing to do with America.
I think sometimes people get too focused on what other people are saying.
Yeah, I don't care about
you and I don't. I would just like us collectively.
I love our American brothers and sisters, but I want nothing to do with talking about their heritage.
No, but I think we as Canadians need to ignore some of the stuff coming out of there.
I agree.
And focus on what we can do, what we do, what we've done, and what we're about to do.
Hello, my fellow patriots. I am Brady Wedham. Welcome back to TPL Media. Thanks for subscribing or liking or commenting. Even if you don't do that stuff, thank you for being here. Today, we are talking about Canadian national heritage. I was a child actor as a kid. I know I don't want to say it anymore on this thing. I feel like I'm bragging, but I was a pretty busy child. And growing up as a child actor, I didn't spend a lot of time in school. I'll fully admit it. And one of the things that I didn't really learn about was Canadian national heritage. And by the time I became an adult and I was removed from that world, I don't know what I felt about Canadian heritage. I was very proud of it at some points. And the older I got and the more I paid attention to social media, the more I realized that a lot of our Canadian national heritage is misunderstood. So I had to bring in the number one Canadian, the most Canadian man I've ever met in my entire life, Mr. Jim Lang. You beautiful bastard. How you doing?
I'm good, Brady. How are you doing?
Not bad, my friend. I'm sorry to steal your beautiful bastard line.
No. Hey, it's I don't have copyright. It's open to anybody.
We're going to have to copyright it for you because I feel like that's going to be your trademark. You beautiful beast. All right. Okay. What am I getting wrong about Canadian national heritage? I guess the way to open this up is I'm dumb.
No, stop.
No, I don't mean
Brady, no, I want to tell you something real quick.
I'm real dumb with this stuff.
You're not dumb. Think about how we grow up, how we live. We watch TV shows and Netflix, and there's epic movies about the U.S. Revolution, and the signing of Declaration of Independence, and like epic movies, Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, Netflix Power series.
Americans feel real proud when they watch that stuff.
So as Canadians, we don't really have access to that. It's one thing to sit there in school and go through the curriculum and you're grinding through to get the grade. Like you may be a math person or an English person or an arts person or sports. So you just want to get through the class, pass, and move on, and you don't really think about it.
No, that's a young kid. You just want to get through the day. As
an adult, you learn much more. Say it's a 6-part Netflix or Amazon Prime series, or it's a movie starring a major Hollywood star. You're going to like I watched Project Hail Mary with Ryan Reynolds. It's an incredible movie. And here's an A-list Canadian Hollywood A-list megastar.
One of the top 5, right?
Yeah,
I think in the world.
Teaching me more about space and space travel than I ever learned in school. And that's what I'm talking about. So we as Canadians are inundated with so much content from British history.
Yep. A lot of British history.
The King's Speech and all stuff like that. We hardly have any introduction or any exposure to true Canadian history through movies and television that we would consume. And that's a big part of it, Brady.
Well, I guess just to this happened just before the pandemic, but we started to see a lot of people pushing back on our heritage and things like, Sir John A. Macdonald got dragged through the mud and a few other.
Well, Dundas Square in Toronto.
Dundas Square in Toronto got renamed.
Yeah.
Right. Like we've pulled back on that, and we've seen that in the States too. We've seen a lot of former slave owners and things like that. That maybe they did some good stuff, but they were still slave owners and had kind of a negative background. They've taken their statues down. They've taken down the monuments. We've done that a little bit here in Canada, but I never seen anybody crap on Terry Fox. Right. I never seen anybody crap on maple syrup. Like these are the things that people think the Canadian heritage is, but it's so much more deeper and vaster than just these surface level things.
When you think about it, the first Canadians were first people coming to Canada to settle and trade started in the 1600s.
If anybody's watching and they don't know how we actually became Canadian and how this country became Canada, as far as you know,
I mean, first of all, the first person to come to Canada technically was the Viking Leif Erikson.
Okay.
who landed in part of what is now Labrador, Newfoundland. And that was the first people actually hit North America. Long before Christopher Columbus discovered America, it was Vikings hitting Newfoundland.
And what did they do?
They tried to settle there.
Did they do their whole Viking thing? Like, we're rolling up on shore and we're going to start plundering?
No, here's the issue, though. At that time, there was only Indigenous Canadians who really wanted no part of them.
Yeah.
So it was a different dynamic for them. So they didn't stay that long because of the conflict between the Indigenous Canadians who didn't want them there and the Vikings who were a little out of their element and couldn't grow a lot of the crops and do a lot of things they're used to doing because of the climate and geography there. But it wasn't until the 1600s where they took sailing ships down the St. Lawrence River and into what we know as now as Quebec City and Montreal and Ottawa and Eastern Ontario, excuse me, and started settling. And the fur trade.
Yes.
And that was the Hudson Bay Company.
I was just about to say,
that was the big thing.
We just watched the Hudson's Bay close it.
Which broke my heart.
It broke my heart too.
Because the whole idea of the fur trade in Canada with the trappers who would work part and parcel with the Indigenous Canadians on these huge canoes that would go along the rivers and huge lakes, and they would put them on the ships and send them back to Europe with beaver pelts and fox and all this.
Some of the most horrific conditions too, Jimmy. Like, this is like half the boys didn't make it home sometimes.
No,
right?
They did
It was
not.
bad.
So that was the basis of it. And then you had settlers who were developing relationships and marrying Indigenous women, creating the Métis community. Mm-hmm. And it was the start of something. And it was settlements along the St. Lawrence River, along Lake Ontario, into what we now know as New Brunswick and Nova Scotia.
Yep.
Because the resources at the time were simply unheard of in a lot of the European countries. Endless acres of forest and fur trade and all this kind of stuff, which just they didn't exist.
So, and the Americans took advantage of that too, right? They came up here and did trading. The Hudson's Bay Trade Company, like that was a big thing for North America. It kept the things moving. It kept the Indigenous people in a proper situation where they're actually being compensated at the time. Now it seems we're back in that zone again in 2026. But originally it felt like they weren't. This didn't feel like it was a war like we've been told. It's felt like a group of various groups of people trying to. But they were trying to figure it out, right?
They were definitely trying to figure it out, Brady, and to each other's benefit and try to live together. The Canadian settlers and Canadian people by nature were less warlike and combative than the American settlers, who tried to fight and take over and claim.
Did we have the wars like they did down south, though? Like down south, you've heard about all of these different tribes, and not only were these Indigenous tribes warring with each other, they were also warring with the white man or whoever, right? The people that were trying to colonize the area. Did we have those kind of issues up here as violently and as bad as the Americans did with the Apache and whatever else, right?
Well, since the Apache was so far away from the Canadian border and
they were a unique creature in themselves.
They were through the Midwest and the Southwest of America. So
tough group.
The Canadians were dealing with the Algonquin, the Cree, the Mohawk, the Micmac.
Iroquois, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And the Haida out west. But a lot of it was trying to live in some sort of harmony. But through that, Canada started to grow, and then a larger and larger British colony and French colony happened. And you had, obviously Quebec, the province, was heavy French based and become the French Canadian capital, the French speaking, basically outside of France, the biggest French speaking country. Area outside of France.
Still technically is.
Yeah, really.
Right?
It's huge.
Yeah.
You have that.
Now, mind you, all those people are located in one province, but we still...
No. Yeah, don't forget your Acadian history, right?
Yeah, I know.
So there's pockets in Nova Scotia, in New Brunswick, Northern Ontario, out west in Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta. So there are some French Canadian pockets that maybe a lot of Canadians don't realize. But you'll find French Canadian named towns out west and in different parts of the country, including New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, that a lot of people are shocked who've not spent a lot of time traveling in Canada.
So we started at like the 1600s here, right? And in the trade. Let's move up a little bit, because if we don't, we're going to do a 9-hour podcast.
No.
Right? So let's go from the Hudson's Bay Trade Company. Things are starting to get themselves sorted out. Yes, there's some conflicts, but people are starting to develop it. We get to the 1800s, the gold rush starts. People are all over gold. They want to go to gold. They came to Canada.
Right. Well, now, parts of Canada.
Yukon.
And back then, the railway wasn't built to the 1800s.
So actually, let's talk about the railway first before we get into gold. Yeah.
So the British North America Act in 1867, Canada becomes a country. And that's Confederation. That's where, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, that was the original start of Canada.
Yep.
As a country. And it wasn't long afterwards that John A. Macdonald, the first prime minister, thought we need to go coast to coast.
We're going to talk about John in detail towards the end.
A flawed man, but a visionary, like a lot of them. Like,
there's a pros and cons list for Sir John.
And I could do the same thing for Andrew Jackson and George Washington and a lot of the founding fathers.
George Washington has a very long list.
Right.
Lots of pros, lots of cons. Yeah.
But so in the 1880s, they undertake an incredible engineering feat because at the time, in Ontario and Quebec, a lot of the farmland was spoken for.
Yeah.
And they wanted to grow Canada. So if immigrants are coming to Canada, a lot of the French and Scottish and Irish and English and all the type of European immigrants who were settling all throughout those parts of the country into the Maritimes in Ontario, Quebec, all had the farmland. So they had to go somewhere. So they had railways across the what was then the country, and John A. Macdonald, the Canadian founding father, decided to build it across Lake Superior, Northern Ontario, and across the prairies. And what they did is they were telling immigrants that come here for next to nothing. Here's a bunch of land. Come settle in Canada.
And be part of this trade system.
Right. And as the railway was built through Northern Ontario, across what we know now as Sault Ste. Marie, Thunder Bay, into the west, into Winnipeg.
Still there to this day, right? Yeah.
The immigrants were getting off the train and like, I'm here now. And they'd go, and the railway would go further west into Saskatchewan, and they'd settle there.
Okay, slow down for a second. Let's actually paint that picture. So you leave Europe.
Yes.
And you, as far as you know, because we didn't have phones and stuff back then, it was all like, we were sending letters, and if you were lucky, you had a dove that took your little letter to the next guy. But realistically, we had a very primitive post office system. So you're under the belief when you're leaving Europe or you're leaving one of these countries that you're going to go to Canada and you're going to get off at a train stop. And when you get off on that train stop, there's going to be a chunk of land that's already dedicated towards you.
Yes.
Could you imagine that ride getting to that train stop? You're like, am I just getting to a port and they're gonna sell me? Like, is this real? What's going on here?
The climate in Poland, in Sweden and Germany and all those other European countries coming over is a little different than Manitoba and Saskatchewan in the late 1800s, where it's the Wild West.
Yeah. That's
and
what
they're
I mean.
like,
you don't know what you're getting into.
No, they've never seen an Indigenous Canadian.
This is so
They've
crazy.
never dealt with winter where it gets -40, -45.
This
was
crazy.
Survival at its base instinct, just trying to stay warm and feed yourself and take care of your family.
Did the United States do that? Because as far as I know a little bit more about American history than I do Canadian history, and I hate to say
There's actually a movie with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman that explains it, where he has the worst Irish accent in the history of an actor.
What is that?
It's a Ron Howard movie, and I can't remember the name of it.
It's not the Born Dick.
Far and Away. Thank you, Nick.
That's what it was.
So basically, they were told if you go to Oklahoma, you can get 100 acres of land, and it was the great land rush. And so they were these immigrants coming off the boat, escaping the Irish potato famine, and going out west on a train and getting on a horse and racing to a plot of land, and that's my farm.
I blame the Irish potato famine on my genetics of why I'm so tiny, malnourished. But no, okay, so the United States was doing it as well, but it seems like Canada, they really did it. Like, this was how we built the country.
And because John A. Macdonald, he did not want the trains going from Windsor through the States to go to Western Canada. He was adamant, we can't have any railway going through the U.S. It has to go through Northern Ontario to the prairies, which is ironic because right now, our main oil pipeline goes through the
place
Michigan,
that he didn't want it to go through.
Right. And that's why there's talk, we can't do that. So at that time.
But why did John do that? Was it to keep Canada sovereign, or was he still like, hey, we just had a war a little while ago?
They were worried about losing British Columbia.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to get British Columbia into the Confederation.
Yeah.
And they're like, how do we, once you went through the Okanagan, there was the most.
The White House got burnt down because of that.
untouched, raw, rough land in the world.
Yes. Have you ever been? You've been. I know you have been. I've driven out in the Okanagan in the summer.
Yeah. No, I've not been in the Okanagan, but I mean, so if you were to go into the prairies, and I've driven across the prairies, and this is like, in modern times, it's rough. I can't imagine what it was like in the 1800s.
Oh yeah, it would be impossible because I was just about to say I've done the Okanagan and that whole hell. We used to call them hell tours on pro wrestling, right?
Yeah.
So you would drive across frozen lakes to save time and things like that in the middle of the night with a ring van full of guys and a trailer pulling a ring behind you, right? So you had tons and tons of pounds driving across these things, and I ran into a bunch of problems out there, but we'll keep that for a different day. But going through that in the winter would be. You would die.
Well, they did.
You would die.
I mean,
More people die than make it out
because of the climate and how harsh it was.
There.
So at the same time,
and it's all mountains, right? Like it's a lot. I can only imagine the wildlife would take you out, not even the weather.
Which was what they were being introduced to wildlife, the immigrants they had never seen before.
You never seen a grizzly bear. You ever seen a big brown bear? You know
Not
what I mean?
Warsaw,
Well,
right? So that
Yeah.
seriously,
yeah.
So
Packs of wolves and
so the railway started going west across the prairies, and then they started building it from Vancouver east. And what they did is they brought a lot of Chinese labor, and that was the beginning of the Chinese-Canadian immigration, Chinese labor. And albeit, as Pier Burton rightly says, they were really rough with them and how they treated them and how dangerous work they did. But these Chinese laborers...
they were almost under slave conditions from the books that I
They
read.
were the reason they were able to build the rail line through the mountains. They did the most dangerous work to get that rail through the mountains, into the passes, into the prairies, and that's how Canada was connected.
So we connect Canada, and we've got the Hudson's Bay trade, which even at that time, still a couple hundred years later, is still thriving. It's still
absolutely
booming at that point. I guess not thriving anymore. It's now booming. And then we have another boom, gold.
Well, I mean, it was a bit of a boom. I think the bigger boom was the population boom in the early 1900s.
Okay.
So after the railway is built, now you could get off a boat in Halifax at Pier 21 or in Montreal and get on a train and conceivably settle in Manitoba or Saskatchewan, Alberta, or BC. And my grandfather came to Canada in 1928, and he landed at Pier 21, and he come from an impoverished little village in southern Germany where they were eating potatoes 3 times a day because they couldn't afford to feed each other. And the village elders told him, you have to leave here because it's horrible. And this is post World War I, where Germany was in a deep, deep depression. And a Ukrainian Canadian priest had come to Europe looking for strong men. At the time, wheat was harvested by these big, the size.
Yeah, the size.
And he said, he's like, great. So he came over with like no money, couldn't speak a word of English, thinking he was going to get off at Pier 21, get on the train and go to Saskatchewan and harvest wheat and settle there.
And what happened?
He got off the boat and someone speaking German said, does anyone here know how to cut meat? As God is my witness.
So he got purged before he even got out there.
So my grandfather ended up having a career as a butcher and meat inspector at Canada
No,
Packers.
he stayed in that business. Wow.
Yeah. And that's how he never made it. So he never made it out west. And lucky enough, his Lang, it was easy to spell. Because what happened was when a lot of the immigrants came in the 20s and 30s and 40s in Pier 21 and had really complicated last names, a lot of them were anglicized by, look, it was old white guys who were doing the paperwork.
Yeah, they were just making up last names for them. Smith.
Right.
Jones.
My mother-in-law coming from Holland, they were trying to do family tree work, and they're like, why does it stop? And they realized they changed the spelling when they arrived.
My last name actually, the heritage, I guess, the bloodline that's still over in Europe, it's a completely different last name.
Yeah.
My last name is Wedham. It's actually over there is Bottomley Wedham.
Oh, is that right?
Now, how I got my name. Yeah, and how I got my name, I could only imagine wetting his bottom. It sounds like bottomly wet him, but that's what they did. They took off chunks of names. They manipulated the ends of names to sound more like they did a bunch of stuff. This is why you see Smythe and Smith It's probably the same bloodline.
And Greeks, Macedonians, all those different cultures.
Yeah.
And their names are like, well, it's different in the old country because it is different
It was manipulated by a guy who got here to make things easier for everyone.
So you don't speak English. You land in Halifax or Montreal to have a good life. What are you going to argue with the guy?
I don't think it was whitewashing. You're right. There was a bunch of old white guys doing it, but I think it was actually probably just to make it easier on everyone.
And spelling.
And we still see this to this day. I have Indian friends who come over and their names are whatever it is, right? I got a buddy, Junaid. Well, that's not his name. That's just the Canadian version.
The anglicized version.
That's the anglicized version, right? But his name is probably whatever it is.
So I recommend any Canadian go to the Pier 21 Museum in Halifax, which is still there because millions of Canadians came through there from the 20s to the 60s and landed there on the boat and then made their way to different parts of Canada. Montreal was also a popular destination. And my father-in-law, after World War II, came from Holland. And they still, my wife and her sisters were able to look up on the manifest. You can see his name and how much money he had. He had like $40 equivalent of Canadian and an old suitcase. And that's how he arrived.
Well, I'm heading out there over the next 4 weeks, so I'll make sure I check in and send you a video. But.
Yeah. And so this changed Canada.
Okay.
Because not only could you arrive here, you didn't have to be stuck in Montreal or Toronto in a big city. If you wanted to set up a farm or be in mining or do whatever, you had the chance to get on a train and go anywhere in the country.
So crazy. So, but like I said, and this will be the third time I brought it up. Gold. What do you know about the gold rush that happened? Why were all of the Americans coming up here and risking their lives?
So you know about the San Francisco 49ers.
Yes, sir.
That was 1849, the gold rush there.
Yeah.
And what happened is when they tapped out, they're all like, where do we go now?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a insatiable need to go to different places to search for gold.
And they risked their life going up to Canada.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
So, and Alaska.
Yeah.
So they were going to the Yukon, they were going to Alaska, anywhere someone said, I think there's gold there, they would go there and be part of the gold rush.
You know, that movie, The Revenant, that came out years ago, that Leo won an Academy Award for.
And Tom Hardy's in it.
Which he should have won an Academy Award for Wolf of Wall Street. I feel like that was just the one that they...
100 times over.
They had to give him this one just because they felt bad about that. But The Revenant, that was kind of the story of it too, right? Traveling down... No, they weren't coming from the Yukon down to Texas, but it was the same kind of a thing. That's the environment that you were in if you were gold mining in Alaska and the Yukon, because by the time the deep freeze came, you had to get out.
No, it was
you gotta go.
It was inhuman.
But the reason why I'm saying this is because us Canadians, we never left.
No,
we stayed.
This in a bigger picture, Brady, when you think about Canadian heritage, people often wonder why are there so many top tier comedians and comedic actors from Canada?
Tell me.
A lot of it, I believe, is the climate we grow up in. It's harsh. It's cold. It's winter.
So it makes them cynical?
Well, no. Okay, there's times in the winter you can't go out. You're going to watch Monty Python and SNL and SCTV. So you get all these influences. And if you can put up with living in this country with the winters we have, and you have to have a sense of humor to survive it.
This is a little off topic, but it's kind of on topic. I don't think I've ever admitted this to anybody before, let alone done this on a camera. How I got into child acting was because I lived in the country where I had no friends. I had my cousin, which would come over on the weekends. But
and you make your own fun, right?
I had a antenna, so I only had 3 channels, but I had a VHS player, and I had a lot of VHS. My uncle used to tape movies for me, and I became obsessed with the Jim Carreys and the Martin Lawrences and In Living Color and
There's
SNL.
There's many stories of Canadians who did the same thing.
And that's what I did in auditions as a kid. I played that role. So you're right. Like, I got limited. So it got me into acting. So maybe you're right. Maybe this is the reason why a lot of them do end up getting into entertainment, is because that's all they know at that age. They're stuck in home.
The NHL is filled with
it's different now.
Some of the old-time greats who grew up in rural Canada with nothing to do but play hockey. Or
who was Jericho's father? Chris Irving. Who was his father was a famous player. Irving was his last name, but it was the same kind of thing. Like he came from a rural place in like Winnipeg.
What else are you going to do?
Right? Yeah.
The interesting thing about the immigration and the growth of Canada and the railway. So this all leads into what is a lot of people, the seminal moment where Canada truly became a nation. That's the Battle of Vimy Ridge in World War I.
Yeah.
It's 1917. World War I's going on since 1914. The Allies are in trench warfare with the Germans, and they have had the French and the British try to take Vimy Ridge, a key part in the Battle of World War I, and suffer loss after loss. And Canadians, a lot of them who had come from different European countries to settle and now are Canadian, basically may have been born there or their parents came over and were born in Canada, and now we're part of the Canadian Army, pulled off one of the great military feats of the entire World War I in Vimy Ridge. And for a lot of people, that's when
it changed the momentum.
It changed the momentum, changed the perception of Canada, changed how Canadians view themselves. And this all of a sudden you started to see Canada really become a nation. The cities grew. Vancouver became a big deal.
Toronto, Hamilton, time. Montreal was growing at a rapid
Halifax
pace.
and shipping. So now we have huge shipyards in Halifax and Vancouver, and the country population is growing.
And beautiful European architecture.
Yeah,
and those are like
because they're bringing over the influence.
And I just said it when we were in Montreal. It's a shame to see how much that the city can't maintain some of those buildings, but it may be. It looks like a bigger Hamilton, right? I spent a lot of time in Hamilton, Ontario, and Hamilton, Ontario gets a really bad rap.
But there's parts of it that are stunning.
So gorgeous downtown.
Out west, you should see some of the Russian Orthodox churches, the old ones that were built in the early 1900s from the immigrants with the domes and that.
The Soviets had, like, we say what you want about them. There's nothing really positive to say about that Soviet Union movement, but man, the architecture.
Yeah, from the old Russians, right?
Goodness, they were onto something.
But, so this is where all of a sudden Canada really starts changing. They have manufacturing. They have factories, right? That's all of a sudden you have automobile manufacturing is growing in Windsor and Oshawa.
Early electronics. We started our own early electronics companies. We had Radio Shack, which was just basically a distribution center for all of our Canadian electronics.
Hey, in 1922, a couple of research scientists create a thing that changed the world: insulin.
Insulin, yeah.
Banting and Best, right?
Yeah.
With that saved tens of millions of lives. Up until 1922, type 1 diabetes was a death sentence. You could not survive it.
One of the most overlooked pieces of Canadian history, Alexander Graham Bell.
Right, the telephone.
If we didn't have a Canadian in Brantford, Ontario, who was so bored that he just didn't start doing this, we would not be taught. This wouldn't be a thing.
No, so you start thinking about, and this is something that Andrew Coyne in the Globe and Mail talked about this Wednesday where they were taping. His concern, Canada's a country, what have we done growth-wise, project-wise in the last 8 to 10 years? Very little. And he was speaking about it from
Toronto FIFA ready?
Right. An historic perspective, because if you go through the decades, Brady, we have Alexander Graham Bell, the discovery of insulin. We have this, we have that, we have the Canada Arm, we have all these things, the huge Churchill Falls hydroelectric, all these massive things that we did as a country. And I think there's a lot of people looking around going, hey, we got to start doing that again. We did it for years in the beginning of the country. We've got to get back to it. And there's a real appetite, I believe, in the country for big things and big projects. And this whole economic reset that Carney and Champagne had is talking about 80 to 100,000 tradespeople. Basically, they're going to hand you the money to get your trade. Because they want to build things. I'm okay with that.
We're about 20 years behind.
Yes.
But thank goodness at least it's being done now. I can complain all I want until I'm blue in the face and say, well, it should have been done 20 years ago. But it's happening now, so who am I to complain? We were a country that was built off of trades. We were a country that was built off of hard work. I feel like that's a lot of our heritage. Things like you said, the Hudson's Bay. We've got the Yukon building their little cities and prospering off of that. We have things like the railroad going across Canada, specifically staying in Canada.
Exactly.
Then we see a lot of negativity. It started about, I think 2012 was the very first time we've really seen a switch on the misunderstandings of what our Canadian heritage is. And a lot of the negatives were highlighted. All the way up through the pandemic, yes, people were bored, so they highlighted everything that was negative and didn't focus on a lot of the positive. But we're now in 2026, and every time I type in Canada or hashtag Canada online, I see just as many good things about who we are, and I see just as many bad things. And everything from the woke movement, carbon tax, green movement, to the past of our heritage that we're very proud of. And now I'm learning more just from talking to you. But there's a group and there's a vibe out there that wants you to not pay attention to that and only pay attention to the negatives. So I wouldn't be truthful unless we talk about some of those negatives.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah. Crown land is where I want to start.
Right. So part of the problem is we have to take a step back. I know what it's like in 2026 in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know what it was like in 1866 in Canada?
Not a clue, Jim.
Not a clue. And so this is it. They did bad things.
Yeah.
They did bad things in Europe. They did bad things in America. They did bad things around the world. They didn't know any better. We know better now. Now, maybe I wouldn't take down a statue, but in the statue, you put a new plaque saying, this is the good things they did, but also acknowledge this is the bad things they did.
Yeah.
So you make up your mind. This was one of the founding fathers of Canada who did this, this, and this. However, they also did this, this, and this.
Well, and I'll use an American example. We use George Washington, but Ben Franklin. Right? Ben Franklin did a lot of things that we're still, like I said, we're reaping the benefits of to this day. But Ben Franklin was a pretty bad guy. Sounds like when you start measuring these pros and cons, it sounds like there was a really weird past. But do we look at it? Do we throw out everything good that he's done and everything good that we're now living with and have a benefit from because of some of the negativities from? And like you said, that was the times.
It doesn't make it right.
Doesn't make it right. No, we never
to
want to make it right.
Residential schools is a dark stain in Canadian history.
It's bad.
It is the worst of the worst. But at the time, they thought they were doing a good thing. Looking back, it was a horrible, horrible thing. Horrible what they did. And
I think this is such a weird one. I think the intent and the plan was good, like you're saying. But some of the people that were executing it and were in charge of it
were horrible people.
Downright disgusting people, man.
And again, they're thinking, let's settle Canada. I mean, most of North America, if you think Canada and the United States, what did they do? They basically went from east, settled, and went west. And what did they do as they went along? They just started grabbing hundreds of acres of land that had been owned by Indigenous people for thousands of years.
Yeah, and
they said, this is our land now.
And thank goodness that Canada's trying to still, to this day, trying to make that right.
Right.
We would be a very insensitive and very ignorant country if we didn't at least sit down at the table and try and discuss this now in 2026.
But in 1885, they didn't know any better.
You're right. They don't know any better. And like you said, this is a sign of the times, right? So Sir John A. Macdonald, he gets a lot of slack.
Yeah.
Right? He gets a lot of slack. And maybe it's deserved. Well deserved.
But from John A. Macdonald, you had good prime ministers, William Lyon Mackenzie King, and Lester B. Pearson.
Lester B. Pearson, man.
And Lester B. Pearson, and there's a reason Pearson Airport's called that in Toronto. He was a huge reason and a huge voice in the UN during the Suez Crisis in '56. He was a huge founding father of the whole UN peacekeeping movement, which Canada was at the forefront. And he did a lot of good in the world. And he was a proud Canadian and something we can look at.
So, one of the things that Sir John A. Macdonald did was make our federal government strong and strengthen it and keep it secure and locked in so that it couldn't be manipulated for gain. 2026, that seems to, oh boy.
Well,
right?
I mean, we assume.
Oh boy. So, but he did. What he had built out with the government itself was basically so that the government couldn't be compromised from within.
Yeah, they acknowledged the monarchy.
Yep.
And hey, the king and the queen and that, but we're Canada.
Yep.
And we have a prime minister, we have members of parliament, we have premiers, and we're going to govern ourselves.
Now, Crown land. I think has been a big, and this is a completely different show. We could probably go off on an hour just on Crown land and why we should be utilizing it a little bit more.
And I think they're trying to.
They're starting to now. Well, things aren't as good in the monarch as they used to be even just 20 years ago, right? The royal family seems to be struggling with some things over there. If you listen to the internet, they'll tell you they're broke. I don't ever think that's going to be a thing.
Well, their version of broke and our version's different.
It's completely different, right?
Yeah.
But Crown land, I think Crown land, when we're talking about things like, well, why don't we take resources out of, why aren't we doing more with our resources? I think Crown land has stopped a bit of that, right? We knew that there's probably resources in areas. Mind you, they do lease out Crown land.
Well, I'm just going to push back a little bit.
Please do.
It's if you have enough fortitude and wherewithal, you can push through anything. If you decide as prime minister with your cabinet ministers and your caucus, look, for the national good of this country, we need to build a bridge. We need to build a hydroelectric dam. We need a nuclear power plant. We need to build a pipeline. It gets done.
Yeah.
It gets done.
And it gets done through the Crown land. Yeah.
Right. And we have a
through.
history through this country of like, hey, we need to do this for the betterment of the country. And right now we are at a tipping point with everything going on with Donald Trump in America and everything going on with Iran, that now Shell just spent tens of billions of dollars to invest in a liquid natural gas facility in Alberta and BC.
Which we need.
It's good for the country.
It doesn't matter what side of the politics you're on. I think we all agree we need to start pulling some of these resources out.
And then Asia is going to be buying our liquid natural gas.
Yep.
So they don't have to worry about, hey, we're going to run out because something's going on with Donald Trump and the Persian Gulf and Iran.
Well, some of this stuff, Donald Trump's going to be long gone by the time.
But the Persian Gulf and Iran problem is still going to be there, Brady.
It might be. It might be. We'll see.
We can't guarantee that just because he leaves, it leaves.
Well, I think that was a perfect example that every country really needs to kind of get themselves figured out here. We can't be relying on one little patch of land for a global trade economy. That doesn't work like that. And if it can be compromised as quick as it was,
yeah,
then something else needs to be figured out. We cannot be relying on other countries' resources. We need to rely on our own first and then build off of those to, like, we don't have the same resources that Africa does, right?
No, but we have stuff they don't have.
But we have stuff they don't have. So let's just start getting back to the, you know what I mean? Taking our own stuff and using it as trade again. Let's start a new Hudson's Bay company. We'll call it True Patriot Bay.
I'm fur trading ain't what it used to be, though, unfortunately. But the idea, the concept is there of a truly Canadian company doing big things in the world, using what we have, our brain power. When I say resources, and I think you and I say resources, people have to understand it's not just rocks and trees and oil.
I mean everything that this country offers us.
It's the scientists, it's the brain power, it's the artists.
Start growing hemp so that we can make textiles from hemp. What do we need concrete for, right? Like,
I mean, anything and everything should be in play here.
Yeah.
Because it just insulates us from financial enemies and any kind of other enemies.
What's your understanding of what Crown land is?
Well, I always thought Crown land is something that the government owns, that
the government or the monarch?
I think it's the federal government. That's how I believe it is.
Mm-hmm. I've always heard it was a retreat. That Crown land was a retreat.
See, I guess I don't know enough about Crown land, because when I hear the term Crown land, I assume it's the Canadian Crown.
Nick, can you get us the definition of what Crown land is, producer Nick? You beautiful creature.
Yeah, he can look it up.
Technically, what Wikipedia or Google, what they classify as Crown land. But I had heard Crown land for years was always a place where, you know, if something ever happened over there, this is where they relocate.
The one thing about Canada as a nation, you know, here we are, looking ahead in a couple months, we'll be celebrating another birthday of this great nation.
Yeah. It's a beautiful country.
It's a beautiful country.
We talk a lot of good and a lot of bad about it, but it is amazing.
We evolve. We have evolved as a country to the way we did things in the 1880s, to the 20s, to the 40s and 50s. I mean, it changes all the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick. What do you have?
All right, so it is public land held by the Crown or the state, which means it's owned by either the federal government or more commonly the provincial or territorial governments.
Oh, thank you.
So it's got nothing to do with the monarch at all?
I don't believe so.
No. Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's a term, Crown land.
We're going to have a lot of truth seekers and conspiracy theorists telling me in the comments section, they're like, no, you're totally right, Brady.
No, because I know that there's like Ontario, I know for a fact has portions of Crown land.
Remember what the opening line I said at the beginning of the show when I introduced you? I'm dumb.
No.
But I'm not
Brady,
saying that. I'm not saying that as a. I'm not putting myself down. Like
again, start thinking about this. Where would you have ever learned about that in school? You didn't. Nick had to look it up.
Yeah.
So there's so many things in Canadian society.
I've read a lot and I've watched a lot of documentaries.
Right.
And I've heard the latter, like, which sounds like I said it's not true.
Was it a Canadian documentary though?
I don't know.
That's the problem.
No.
So I think as Canadians,
I think it was more anti-royal family, to be honest.
Well, there's that, but I think for a lot of Canadians, it's I've made it my life mission. I love history. So I've read books and I've studied and I've tried to learn what I was not taught in school or I didn't know.
Well, and that's why I begged the guys in the newsroom. I'm like, please let me sit with Jim because he is the most Canadian guy ever. He knows this country front and back.
And as much as I think I know, there's so much I don't know. So I'm always trying to learn. So I'm always trying to experience different things in this country and travel to different areas of the country. One of the most illuminating things I did as a Canadian is a couple of years ago, we had to help our daughter move to Edmonton for her master's degree. So I had never done it. And I did the drive up the 400 to Sault Ste. Marie to Thunder Bay across Lake Superior. I was stunned to find out the Trans-Canada Highway in the far northern Ontario is only 2 lanes.
Yeah.
After all these years, they still not made it a 4-lane highway.
I don't know if it needs to be, though.
Yeah, it does. You know how many trucks are on there? It's white knuckle.
Have you seen Highway 11 up north in Ontario? There's literally a trucker accident every day.
Right. So they need, and then when you go across the prairies, when you're driving across Western Canada, it is one of the most breathtakingly beautiful things I've ever experienced.
Beautiful, my friend.
Wow. It was, and
Saskatchewan always gets the rap of being like the most boring place.
No, it's stunning.
Are you kidding me? If your eyes work, it is the most amazing place. And if you go out there in the fall and you see the color changes, I don't know if you've had the luxury of being out there in the fall.
No, I was there. It was the end of December.
Oh, my goodness.
So then when you drive, you're doing that drive, you end up from Regina to Saskatoon, and you cross in Lloydminster, Alberta, which is right on the border of Saskatchewan, Alberta. Then you're driving through ranch land that looks like the ranches on Yellowstone.
It looks like North Dakota.
And you're like, and the horses and the cattle, and like as far as you can see. Yeah. And then you're into Edmonton. Like it's an amazing country that so many Canadians have never really discovered or taken the time to learn. That's why I'm always like, hey, if I ever got a chance to go to this part of the country or that, and I've never been, I'm going.
Canadian heritage, and since you spoke about Edmonton, the West Edmonton Mall.
It's still the biggest mall in the world, is it not?
I don't know if it is anymore. I think there's one in Dubai that's bigger. Right. Yeah, but technically, that was a claim to fame for us for pretty much the entire 70s up to a couple years ago.
It has a Ferris wheel inside the mall. It's got a
water slide.
It's got a full rink that the Edmonton Oilers practice on.
Yeah, well, Cambridge, Ontario has a full rink too.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, because Cambridge, Ontario is amazing. They've got a little rink in their mall. But yes, West Edmonton Mall. That is a part of our heritage. Look at how many people we had brought up just from the cities on the border just to go see the West Edmonton Mall.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing thing.
You know, Brady, I know there's a lot of division where a lot of people who cry about different parts of the media and different reporters and different broadcasters. As Canadians, we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't listen to or watch everyone. Because whether or not you may not like them as a person, they may say something that teaches you something about Canada, whether it's the CBC or the Globe and Mail or it's TPL or whoever it's coming from. You're going to learn something about this country and learn something about Canada that makes you a better person.
I know this hurts your heart every time I say it, but you know my feelings on hockey. I'm not a big hockey guy.
Yeah.
I don't watch a lot of it, but I used to always watch Don Cherry's speeches.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I'm
whether I agree with Don or not.
Hockey's in my DNA.
What do we do? What are we doing?
Hockey misses Don Cherry.
He's part of our heritage, guy.
But now, fortunately, just a little aside, he was in his mid-80s when he finally left, right? The CBC and Hockey Night in Canada really should have been looking at a replacement. Who else can we maybe prepare and groom and prep to be maybe take his place?
Jim Lang?
No. But they kept making all this money and everyone's watching Hockey Night in Canada. Yeah. And eventually they're like, oh, we got to get rid of him. And now
I used to laugh at the crazy shit.
Of course.
You know, like
the ties, the jackets.
But even when the line he got in trouble for.
But we also, you know what?
Of course he's going to say it. He's an 80-year-old white guy. Like, come on, guys.
But Brady, how many people got choked up when he'd start crying about a kid that died from cancer who was a little girl that fell and he would, like, he wore his heart in his sleeve as a Canadian. And I have French Canadian relatives who would turn off the French language broadcast to turn him on.
You see
to
what
hear
I've done
him,
here,
then
right?
go back.
You see what I've done here? The reason why I used Don. We got a lot of positive things to say about Don.
Absolutely.
A lot of this is misunderstood. And if you look at Don Cherry right now, let's say a young Canadian was to Google Don Cherry right now, 16-year-old, never even heard of him before. The very first thing he's going to see is that Don Cherry was fired for saying something nasty on TV.
Right. So they don't know the real
They
Don
have
Cherry.
no idea about how beautiful of a soul he is when a young girl passes away and he takes the only 5 minutes that he's got of his time
And
on
does a
CBC
tribute.
Hawk and does a tribute to that girl. We don't talk about that.
You know what else you don't talk about? The fact that Don, over his career, for no money, did thousands of hockey banquets across the country.
But yet we paint the picture that he said something stupid online
Right.
that was supposed to be I don't think it was a joke, but he was passionate about what he said. We don't give him the credit. We bury him. Like I said, I don't think you should be able to do a bunch of good stuff in your life and then go in a public forum and say something insensitive and not have repercussions from it. But this is what we've done with almost everything in Canada right now is that, yes, we have Sir John A. Macdonald, but let's only highlight the negatives. Let's only tell these young kids.
You can be negative about Sir John A. Macdonald all you want,
Yeah, and
but
you
you
should
can't
be.
deny the fact he was the driving force behind a national railroad that changed Canada.
I keep hijacking the show with Sir John A. Macdonald, but I was doing research for this and I was putting this together over 4 or 5 days. The thing that just kept coming back up when you look into Canadian national heritage is what John A. Macdonald built. He built this.
Well,
This is it.
So what he built is the foundation that it sits on.
Yeah. He
What-
paved the way.
And then through subsequent prime ministers and leaders, they did things a little bit differently and tweaked it and improved it and changed it, and it grew and grew. You think not that long ago, Canada was about 28, 30 million people. We're now over 40 million. There's a reason people come from around the world trying to get into this country. If you think about the situations, one of the hockey books I wrote, I talked about a woman who's a teacher in Ottawa, and she's a hockey coach. And on her team was one of the first Syrian immigrants that came from the war that Canada brought in. And now you think about that. This was a family living in a refugee tent city to escape carnage and destruction from a war. And now they're living in Ottawa and playing hockey. And the kid ended up being their leading scorer.
Oh, wow.
And because they loved hockey so much and loved Canada so much, like they went in and put the chips in all in. So there are people coming from situations that we can't even imagine, Brady, to come here and live the Canadian dream and give back to the country. And there's millions of examples of that.
Yeah.
And that's why when we talk about infrastructure, we have to keep spending the money and building it because people still want to come here and live here.
But why wouldn't you, though? Right? Yeah,
Right.
we got a lot of problems, and it's a very expensive place. I kind of consider Canada right now the Ritz Carlton. You get what you pay for, right?
Yeah.
You want to stay in a really nice 5-star hotel, it's going to cost a fortune.
See, I like the Motel 6 kind of guy right here.
I do too, but I'm not going to live in Gaza right now. So, what is your favorite thing about being Canadian, Jim? Like, if you were just because we have all these commercials and they don't play them anymore, but they used to be on TV, CBC specifically, our Canadian heritage, and you'd see things like the national anthem being made, and you'd see things like basketball being created here in Canada, right? People forget too things like this was the end of the Underground Railroad,
Absolutely.
right? The
In Windsor, Chatham, and Nova Scotia, in Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a lot of good heritage. We can focus on the negatives all we want, but slavery might still be going. Probably wouldn't be because we figured ourselves out and evolved, but slavery could still be going if it wasn't things for having an end to the railroad, a place for people to go and restart their lives. Canada gave that opportunity.
I know you're going to think it's silly. When I watch Jurassic Park in a Raptors game, and if for people who don't know, that's the Maple Leaf Square outside of Scotiabank Arena when the Raptors are playing, and their fans are so fanatic about the Raptors that they can't get tickets, but they'll stand outside
In the freezing cold and watch it.
with a hoodie on and cheer on the Raptors. And you see every nationality, every language, every color of the rainbow there. That's Canada.
Oh, yeah, nobody
And
cares.
they're all like, can I get you something? You want something?
And I'm so sick of that argument anyway against it. Why
Well,
do
it's-
people still think that exists here?
It's ridiculous.
Get the hell out of here. That's not a thing.
And it's simple things like that, and united by a basketball game or the World Cup coming up, or being proud and cheering on a Canadian musician. When you see Drake, The Weeknd, and Justin Bieber are 3 of the top 10 most streamed artists.
You don't got to love them to be proud of them.
Like, right?
Yeah.
That's like 3 of the top 10 in the world are Canadian.
Yeah.
Right? And then I just saw Ryan Reynolds in the Hail Mary Project. Here's a kid from London, Ontario, spent some time in Cornwall, and like he's probably going to get nominated for Academy Award. It's that good.
I always used to use Jim Carrey as a measuring stick.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I can anymore after that speech in France, but up until the speech in France, Jim Carrey was a perfect example of just having too much talent, and probably like his English teacher was one of my substitute teachers. Right, I went to school
In Burlington,
in the outskirts of Cambridge, Ontario.
Okay,
actually, a school called
because I know he moved around a bit.
A school called Dr. John Seaton. He didn't go to that school, but the teacher, his English teacher, was over there doing substitute. And I've said this before, I think, on the show, where she was just like, she goes, I'm like, was I even half as talented as Jim? And she's like, no, Jim actually had talent. Get back to work, Brady. Like, but she said he was always very reserved.
Yeah,
like he was a class clown, but he wasn't a lunatic.
Yeah,
he was just had a lot of energy from coming from a small town, and he just wanted to get out his song. And eventually, he found the stage to do it. Right, he met Rodney Dangerfield, and history does it.
He's Shia Twain.
Yeah, Shania
grew
Twain.
up in,
Yeah,
like next to nothing in Timmins, Ontario, with like nothing to her name. You see old photos of her with the feathered haircut, and sort of the plaid shirt, like she's a lumberjack. And then all of a sudden, like she's an international superstar. There's so many examples like that.
Even in the outskirts of Calgary with the Hart family, right? So you have the Harts, and that was people think because if you go to the Hart House now and you see it, they recently
so people
sold.
Don't realize that's the first family of wrestling in the world.
No, but we'll run with it. The first Canadian family.
You think the Von Erichs are better?
Oh, I thought you meant was it the first like
no.
wrestling
I
family?
think of when you think about wrestling families.
Bret Hart's the best wrestler ever in the world. There's never been a better worker than Bret Hart. I'm not saying that we're not talking about drawing. Oh, I'm going to so segue here. Hulk Hogan is the number one. Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, and either a toss up between The Rock, Macho Man, and Ric Flair when in terms of drawing power, money, tickets in the building, which is as the overall business itself. That's what's considered the best wrestler. When it comes to technical wrestling, being in there, working it, having ring awareness, being a general, knowing where you are, calling matches on the fly, there's nobody better than Bret Hart. Maybe his brother comes close, Owen, but Bret was the best, in my opinion. Not a lot of people would argue with me. That. Yeah. No, Bret Hart's the best. No, but what I was going to say about Bret Hart, if you go to the Hart House in Calgary and you look at how big that house was, you'd think that, oh my goodness, these were like a rich family. No, they were not. They were extremely poor. The father there's stories of the kids talking about how the father would be cooking bacon or flipping sausages, and he'd go and take the poop out of the litter box with the same thing and then go back to. So this was some like hillbilly stuff. They had a bear that lived under their deck. It was called Ted the Wrestling Bear. And they used to take Ted out to these shows, and the kids would get in and wrestle him. He had no teeth, and his claws taken out. But what they would do during the day is the kids would all get ice cream, and they'd let it drip off of their feet, and the bear would lick their feet. These were some redneck kids, right? They came from crap.
Yeah.
But they turned it around. Like I said, they ended up becoming one of the most notable families in the world of professional wrestling, and Bret Hart is considered a Canadian hero.
Well, I mean, there's so many examples.
But they come from like. It almost seems like you're right. The more Canadian life that you live, the better chance you're going to have to be a superstar, because these small little towns, these little winter environments, the being bored, the having to create your own, build your own snowmobiles and all this stuff.
These are known people. There's hundreds of world-class Canadians in science and technology, in medicine, in art, and research.
We created Ozempic, which is turning everybody into dust. But yeah, I guess that was
like on and on, like something like that. As a matter of fact, I mean, Ozempic has been a life-changing drug
for a lot of people,
for millions of people who struggle with type 2 diabetes, struggle with their weight, had so many issues. It's changed everything. To the point that basically every pharmaceutical company in the world is trying to find their own version of it.
They're making their own compound, or they're trying to figure out how,
or another version of it.
And like anything, it can be abused, right? Like everybody likes to make fun of Ozempic. Like I said, it just turns your bones to dust. And yes, it may do it, but also it's abuse too, right? Abuse issues with that. That seems to be.
But I just know I have a neighbor who struggled with type 2 diabetes and had a lot of health issues. Yeah. And he's living a better life because of it.
Well, and you just did a great show on peptides, right? And it seems to be that in Russia and Canada seem to be one of the leaders in terms of peptides and the research and how to distribute this properly and not leave it for the gray markets and things like that. So Canada, you're right. When it comes to pharmaceuticals and it comes to medical research, we're pretty innovative. We always have been.
Yeah, and we have our own Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And we have our
Meadowvale.
Yeah, well, there's pockets in Markham, Unionville, and then the Ottawa region.
Yep.
And
Richmond Hill even got it's got
yes,
a bit
it does.
of a boom there.
Yep. And Vancouver in the Lower Mainland. So I just think there's so many things about the country, and if we personally like, we have to stop listening to a lot of the white noise coming out of Washington and what someone calls them the Mango Mussolini. And that's a term I've heard. And start ignoring that and focusing on our own, focusing on what we can do.
This has nothing to do with the States, though. Our Canadian heritage has nothing to do with America.
I think sometimes people get too focused on what other people are saying.
Yeah, I don't care about
No, you and I don't. I would just like us collectively.
I love our American brothers and sisters, but I want nothing to do with talking about their heritage.
No, but I think we as Canadians need to ignore some of the stuff coming out of there.
I agree.
And focus on what we can do, what we do, what we've done, and what we're about to do.
So I'll go back to the question because I cut you off and we segued off of it. What's your favorite part of Canadian heritage? If you can only pick one thing and say this is what represents our country, and this is what represents Canada as a whole, and Jim's beliefs and where we've been and where we're going, what would be that one thing? To me, I have to go back to it. It's Sir John A. Macdonald, and people are going to give me a lot of crap for that.
Well, I'm going to say Terry Fox.
Terry Fox. Thank you.
So Terry
that
Fox,
was my second.
What the Marathon of Hope and what he did was one thing. The legacy, where millions of people in the country around the world run to this day for cancer research because of this humble middle class kid from Vancouver who lost his leg to cancer.
And try and watch one interview where you don't get a tear in your eye.
Oh my God!
It's
So
the most amazing.
The legacy of Terry Fox and how he's brought Canadians of all cultures and all backgrounds together for one unified thing. I mean, it's Terry Fox, his legacy, and how it endures.
Terry Fox is a perfect representation of what Canadians are. And this whole conversation, talking about going through tribulation and going through the unsureties of coming to a new country and not knowing what to expect, but just coming here with the intent to work and be better and better your family and be part of it. Terry Fox is a perfect example of what a Canadian actually is.
Yeah.
Right? Struggle, had everything built up, a wall built against him, and somehow broke that down and just kept going right to the end.
He inspires people to this day.
Yeah, he inspires me every day. Any day I think about Terry Fox in my head, it makes me straighten up a little bit more. It makes my body hurt a little bit less, and it gives my determination a little bit more of a kick that it needs to get through the day.
And it's not just physical, it's mental, it's, what's your excuse? Like, let's get on
What's
with
your
it.
excuse? Yeah.
What's your excuse?
I did the show about what is a man, right? And the one thing that I said in that was man up. I'm constantly telling myself to man up. And maybe I should just be more Terry instead of man up, because people use it as a negative, right? I still like the term man up. Like it works for me, right? Whatever works for you is what you should be utilizing in life to keep you positive and on the right path. But Terry Fox, you're right. Maybe you should just fox it up.
Because sometimes in life,
just fox it up.
Fox it up. You have to just forget about everything and just get on with it.
And just fox it up.
And fox it up.
And fox you and fox me and fox everyone watching. But no.
No, and so I like, Canada has got unlimited potential. I mean, maybe I'm alone in thinking that, but I truly believe we as a country have a limited potential. We have problems. We fall on our face, but like the weather we get through every winter, spring arrives and we've survived winter. Spring's here.
We all look like those bears when they come out of the hole.
A little confused.
What the heck is going on?
And then away we go. And we just keep grinding and keep going and keep building and keep doing things.
Well, because my mind is like a pinball machine, do you think that you missed anything that you wanted to get out in terms of talking about Canadian heritage? Did I segue you off too far? Like, if there's anything else you want to kind of bring up here, let me know.
No, I mean, I just think there's so much about the country to be proud of. We're more than just, I mean, I know there's the cliches where they have the Mounties and the beaver and the maple syrup, but that's just what they sell at the tour shops. Canada is so much more than that.
Yeah.
And what we are as a people and what we do. And you drive around any Canadian city from coast to coast and see what's being done and, what they're accomplishing, what they're building, what they're creating, what they're trying to invent. It's pretty exciting. And I know that you may hate your premier or your MP or your prime minister for a variety of reasons, and that's your right as a Canadian. But don't hate their desire to try to make things better, try to build things and try to improve things.
Yeah.
They might make a mistake, but they're trying to do something.
The government, we can always throw stones at the government.
No matter who's in power.
It doesn't matter who's in power. And you can, even when you like the person in power, you can still use the government as like a way to get out of that.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, it's the government as a whole, and he's not really in power. He's a puppet. I hear that crap all the time. Look, the intent for the government is to try and do good. That's what it's for. It's to try and keep composure. It's trying to keep a bit of like civility between us. Make sure the roads are working. Make sure our schools are working. Make sure the healthcare system is going. They're not always perfect at it, but at least they're still working at it.
Like de Havilland is now based in Calgary.
Yeah.
And they're the world leader in water bombers. And people don't realize that till they saw the Pacific Palisades fire. And
you see those
one
things
after
flying
another,
in?
scooping the water from the Pacific and flying at treetop level. And then you realize, oh, wow, we built that? We did that.
You know, Brian, our military expert, former CAF, he says all the time, you'll never find a tougher soldier than a Canadian soldier.
No.
And I've heard him say it and explain why, and I think he's right. We are the most determined people ever. Stop whining, Canadians. Go back to work. Fox it up.
Fox it up. Yeah.
Jimmy, thank you so much for teaching me a little bit about
Appreciate
the Canadian heritage. You are a sweet beasted. This is TPL Media. Go to tplmedia.ca. Check us out if you like content like this. Like, subscribe, give us a comment, give us a thumbs down. I don't care. Just let me know.
Up.
Let me know your opinion. I just want to hear from you. You can also download our app at any app store at True Patriot Love. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks, Bree.
Thanks, Patriots.